Hey guys, welcome back to E&Y Reviews, although this week I am in the driver's seat and Yohid is the one who's going to be editing the video. This week I watched Her Private Hell. Her Private Hell is a neon-soaked, surreal psychological thriller directed by Nicholas Winding Refn. It is a story about an actress dealing with a strange family and Hollywood dynamics in a misty metropolis. Meanwhile, there is a post-World War II American GI hunting a brutal entity known as a Leatherman to rescue his daughter. So, first off, I want to talk about the music. The music in this movie is really good. It kind of grips you just from the beginning. There's no actual song, so no lyrics that you're going to be hearing, but it's largely instrumental with violins and cellos largely taking the forefront in the movie. One thing I really liked was it would typically follow a moment in which there was complete silence and all you're hearing are the characters speaking with one another. Particularly at the very beginning, the main character, actress, ends up having this long monologue, and then right at the end of the monologue, she says something that really is gripping, and then it proceeds into this chorus almost. And it felt like a surreal moment, and it felt like you were in a dream, which is something that I would almost say is a pretty prominent feeling throughout this entire movie. I know that I just mentioned what the story is about, but when you're actually in the theater watching it, it's really hard to follow along with what's happening. Nothing is linear, and it jumps from people to people and place to place pretty quickly, to where just as you're starting to understand what's happening, it then quickly veers away to something completely different. So, just something to keep in mind. Another thing I really liked was the camera work. There are a lot of shots where the camera is panning around the room, or it is going down a hallway and it's really dark, but there's random lights that are flashing and you really get to see a scene unfold. Additionally, there was a lot of close-ups with the actors in the movie where they are simply staring into a mirror, they're staring through a window, or they're even looking at each other. And nothing is really happening, but you kind of are sitting there with the characters, and it's a really interesting way of film work. Finally, I had kind of mentioned previously with the long shots that there's a lot of color. So the movie overall is a bit dark, but with neon colors, so bright pinks, bright purples, bright blues. And oftentimes, as I had mentioned, the camera would be on a person's face for a long time. Well, at the same time that's happening, you have all these lights that are flashing in multicolor, and so you get to see people's faces in with different shadowing and lighting. And considering this has also been deemed a bit of a horror movie, and so there's horroristic elements to it, it kind of made you wonder what is going to pop up when this light comes back on again. That was a feeling that I had when watching it, and it definitely brought a lot of anticipation in the scene, even if really the only thing that ever happened was just this individual standing there staring at something. So that brings us to the negative part of this, the pacing of the movie. As I mentioned, this story isn't particularly linear. The dialogue can sometimes be a little confusing, and I would say if you don't know what this movie is supposed to be about going into it, you're really not going to know, even while watching. There's a lot of time jumps. They don't really make it clear who a character is, what their role is in the movie, and even at the end when everything resolves itself, you really are left feeling confused on what even happened, what was the lesson learned, or what was the intention of the movie. A little of review. When I was reading people's like thoughts on this movie pretty soon after coming out of the theater. I did notice that this isn't the first movie that this director has done that kind of follows this sort of film work, so perhaps this is just a stylistic choice, and if so, and if you have watched this director before, then perhaps this would be something you'd like. In terms of my rating, I would probably give it a 2 to 3 out of 5. I would give it maybe a 2.5. I only say this because, as I said, I couldn't really follow along with what was going on, so for that reason, that's why it is of a lower rating. However, I do think that the actors in this movie pull it off pretty well. Obviously their acting is pretty good and you're just very intrigued. I think that was the biggest thing for me, is even though I was completely confused on what was going on, I still wanted to keep watching to see how the story would unfold and possibly if things would become clearer. And then in terms of theater worthy, as I said, the camera work, the music, all that stuff really is cool. However, if you end up being lost pretty easily, it might not be worth the money. I do know that there was about 3 or 4 people that walked out of the theater as this movie was going. So if you're kind of on the fence about this, if you've not seen this director's work before, I would almost say don't go see it. However, if you are a fan of this director, then I would say that this is a good movie to go see. That's the end of this video. If you have reached this point, then please drop a pink heart in the comment section. Also like and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next one.